operation building that collapsed in town. And during the earthquake collapse, I was trapped in that building and was pinned at my waist and couldn't pull myself free or anything, and was trapped in that building for about 10 hours. When the rescuers finally got to us, they cut away the desk and pulled me out. But that 10 hours of being stuck in the building had crushed all the muscle tissue around both sides of my bum. And as a result of that, the hospital staff had to cut away 50% of the muscle on both sides of my bum, and also had a crushed sciatic nerve on my left knee as well. So I just thought I'd talk to you guys briefly today about that experience and part of the recovery as well, and what's been happening since then. So when the building first collapsed, there were 12 of us in our office at the time. We shared a floor with another firm, and we were on level 2 of the building. So I don't know if you guys remember, but there's quite a lot of photographs of our building. It was all pancaked on top of each other. There was no distinction between the floors. So we were on level 2, so we were right in the middle of it all. The building was only 4 stories high. We all dived under our desks. Most of us dived under our desks. A couple of people were located in other parts of the building where they had nowhere to go, but the luck of the draw meant that they were okay. We lost one of our directors of our company was killed in the earthquake, and he was about 5 metres away from me, I suppose, but there was a lot of concrete and things like that, so you couldn't really see anything. It was pitch black. And after the building initially collapsed, we sort of tried to make contact with other people who were around us, and soon found out that there was about 6 of us who could talk to each other via various means. And then it was a bit of a waiting game, really. A couple of people managed to get their cell phones and talk to people on the outside and let them know that we were alive, because from the outside it looked like the building wouldn't have any survivors in it. And then it was a bit of a waiting game, really. We sort of talked to the rescue people. A couple of people talked to the rescue people and tried to let them know roughly where we were and how they could possibly get to us, but we didn't know the state of the building at the time. When it collapsed, you could feel the building concertinaing downwards, which was basically, we're on level 2 and it dropped down onto 1, so you could feel that happening. So the first wee while you're sort of thinking, oh well, I'm still alive, can't be too bad, someone will come and get us. And then as time went on, for me personally, the pain of being crushed got worse and worse, and certainly by the end of it, by the time they cut the desk off and pulled me out, the pain was excruciating. And certainly when I got to hospital, when they were prodding around, they initially thought that I had a fractured pelvis and some pretty serious internal injuries, but thankfully it wasn't quite that bad, but it was bad enough that I had to go into the ICU, intensive care unit at Christchurch Hospital for a week. And when you're in intensive care, you have 2 nurses that look after you constantly, and you have a lot of doctors coming around and checking up on you and things. I was pretty out of it when I was in the ICU. I don't remember much of it, so I'd had 2 operations at that point to cut out all that muscle tissue. Because basically, if they hadn't cut that muscle tissue out, it would have gone gangrene and I could have lost my legs altogether. So it was pretty important that they got all that dead tissue out. The other important thing that they discovered during those operations was the crushed sciatic nerve, and your sciatic nerve controls what your foot does. So at the moment I have very limited, if any, feeling in my left foot, and it doesn't move at all, so it just hangs. So I have a special brace at the moment on that foot to help hold it up when I'm walking and I don't trip over my foot. So yeah, from intensive care I then went into the orthopaedic trauma unit, which is where they put people who've suffered quite serious trauma to limbs and such a major event, the hospital was pretty tight on security as well. They had foreign media snooping around all the time, so we actually had security guards on the doors of the rooms, which is pretty unreal. And that was mainly because there were so many overseas people injured in likes of the CTV building and around other parts of town where the tourists were. So whenever any visitors came, they had to sign in and sign out and tell the guards who they were coming to visit and why and all that sort of thing, what their relationship was to you. So I had 3 weeks, a bit over 3 weeks in the orthopaedic trauma unit, and it's a lesser version, I guess, of the intensive care. So there's 3 nurses at any one time in that unit, and there's about 6 patients that they look after. So it's obviously not as intensive, but it's still, you're still under quite a lot of monitoring by the doctors and nurses. When I was in ICU, I think it was the last day I was in there, one of the hospital physios came along to stand me up and see whether I could stand at all. That was pretty excruciating at that time because I still had quite a lot of drains on both sides of my legs. So it was like a 5-second stand-up moment just to see whether it was possible or not. And basically I was held up, I wasn't standing on my own. And then the physio sort of intensified over time. So once I got into the trauma unit, the physios would come in daily. Initially all they would do was stand me up, and they might stand me up for a minute and then sit me back, lie me back down. And then as time went on, that was just increased a bit more and more each day. And initially I couldn't walk at all, so I kind of had to go through the process of learning to walk again, and using gutter frames and all sorts of things that you usually see old people getting around with. So it was a whole new start, I guess, teaching different muscles how to walk again, because you use a lot of your bum muscles to walk, obviously, so other muscles had to compensate in the meantime. I also had about 26 sessions, I think it was, in the unit in the hospital that's called the Hyperbaric Medicine Unit. And if any of you know anything about diving or anything like that, the hyperbaric unit is the decompression chamber that divers go into if they get the bends from diving, so you get excess nitrogen in their blood. But they also use that chamber to do a lot of medical treatments as well. So for me, they used that chamber to help speed up the recovery of the muscle tissue and the massive wounds that I had on my bum as a result of those couple of operations. What it does is you basically breathe pure oxygen when you're at a pressurised level equivalent to 14 metres below sea level, and the oxygen is compressed as well, so it does more work, and so the red blood cells help cure you quicker. That's the whole crux of it, I guess. So each session of that is 2.5 hours, so it took up quite a lot of time, 26 sessions each day. And basically the whole time in hospital was about 5.5 weeks, I think, and met quite a lot of people in there, met quite a lot of interested New Zealanders as well, so had the opportunity to meet the Governor-General, and also met the Dalai Lama when he came to Christchurch as well. And also some of the other earthquake victims as well, who had, some of them had a lot more serious injuries than me. So one of the guys I met, who I'd actually come across before, he was the chap who had both his legs cut off in the Pinewood Corporation building with a pocket knife. So he's an interesting fellow, he's got a much more interesting story than mine, but it's all determined by your attitude, I think, how you get out of it. And from the moment the building collapsed, I always had a positive attitude. So the building collapsed, everything's pitch black, and you think to yourself, well, I'm still alive, so this is good. Someone will come and get me now, and that's precisely what happened. And then when I was in hospital, you know, you've had an operation, the doctors are there to do everything for you, so you think, well, I'm in the best place here, so you know, it's onwards and upwards from here. So I think probably the biggest thing that I've learned out of this whole thing is your attitude determines your altitude. So if you have a positive attitude about the whole thing, about your experience with it, then you'll get out of it with, you know, not too many problems. Since coming out of hospital, I had quite regular physio. I was having that daily as well, and now I'm onto more of a gym program of strengthening my left leg to get it up to speed again. Right leg's basically back to normal, but left leg's held back a bit because of the sciatic nerve damage. Your sciatic nerve regenerates at, they work on about 1 millimetre a day, so it's got to go from my hip to my foot, so it's got a wee way to go. At the moment it's probably about halfway, it's going a bit quicker than 1 millimetre a day, and maybe this time next year, if you ask me, I might be able to move my foot again properly. Work-wise, we had to open up a new office and secure a new building and look after all our staff. We were quite lucky. Out of the 12 people that we had in the building, we lost one person, and I was the only person who was injured and taken to hospital. So the other 10 people in our building walked out with not even a scratch, basically. So we count ourselves pretty lucky. We still say that we had 11 miracles, we just didn't quite stretch it to 12. Our bosses, who were also in the building, they were pretty quick to get on and establish our company back in Christchurch again, and make sure that the staff who were rescued had something to keep focused on and keep active to get through the whole earthquake thing as well. So within 2 days we'd signed up to a new building, and we'd taken a 6-year lease on that, and we had to camp out there, I guess, for about 10 months. It was a warehouse, certainly not an accountant's office like we're used to normally. And since then we've had it fitted out. It's all got all the technology that we need. But certainly it's been a pretty testing time for all of us, not just me who was injured, but our whole staff. They've all suffered quite a lot of trauma. Firstly with being in the building themselves, secondly with losing one of our directors, and you know, then all the upheaval that they had in their own homes as well. Quite a lot of them had extensive earthquake damage to their homes as well that they've had to deal with. So for everyone it's been a pretty big thing, like everyone knows. So again, everyone's attitude has sort of determined how they've got through it, and personally I've noticed a couple of people who perhaps haven't quite got out of it as well as others, have just perhaps not focused on the positives enough. But for me, certainly it's always been about focusing on the next bit of achievement. So when the physios first stood me up, the next thing was, okay, when can I start to walk forwards or backwards or whatever. When I was walking forwards or backwards, I was using a gutter frame, so then it was, when can I use crutches? And it got to the point where when I left hospital, I actually walked out on my own 2 feet. There was a wheelchair there, but I refused it and walked out on crutches. So that was a big milestone for me as well. Probably about 6 months after the discharge from hospital, I threw away the crutches and I went to my trusty cane here. Certainly has caused a good amount of talking around town when people see you getting around with a cane when you're, you know, not a granddad. So it always causes a good conversation starter with people when you meet new people. I think, you know, one of the other important things is that you maintain a good outlook for the city as well. Because it's been such a big event for the whole city and Canterbury, you sort of, the media always get to you about all the negative things that are going on, but there are a lot of positive things that have come out of this as well. And you probably don't read those in the paper so much. So again, your attitude determines your altitude. It's the same with some of the things you read around town. Try and read the positives out of it as well. We get a whole new city. We get a better planned city. We get a lot of jobs out of it all. So there are lots of positives that you have to look at as well. And while it has been a huge thing, we move forward, look to the future, I guess. For me personally, I've come to rely a lot on, during that whole experience, relied a lot on my family and friends, probably more so than I have ever done in my life. Your family and friends are what get you through a big event like that. And in those first few weeks when I was in hospital, certainly when I was in ICU, seeing a couple of familiar faces every day was pretty important. And it got to the point in the trauma unit where I was getting so many friends coming to visit that the nurses started talking about starting a ticketing system because people were lining up in the corridors. But they're really important people as part of your recovery, and they're the people that get you through as much as your own willpower. So it's pretty important that they have a big part in your recovery. And certainly, I think since this whole experience, I've probably taken a lot more time to spend with my family. And you only get one family. You don't get a second chance, really. You don't get to choose your parents or anything. So it's pretty important that you thank them for everything you've got, really, in situations like that. And when it comes to friends as well, I probably make a lot more time for my friends now too. I've always been quite a very career-focused person, and so work usually came first. But since then, I think my attitudes towards work have changed a little, and while it's a big part of my career and things like that, I still make sure I give enough time for my friends and family and community as well. So I'm probably involved in a few more community organisations since then too. And it's about giving back, I think. You take a lot out of the system when you're badly injured like that, so you want to give a bit back. From my parents' point of view, it was a pretty traumatic time for them as well. My mother was in Ashburton for the day and my father was out fishing off Banksville or somewhere, and they didn't actually realise the extent of what had happened in Christchurch, and so I was worried in the building that when they first saw pictures of what our building would look like, that it would be pretty traumatic for them, which I'm sure it was. So one of the important things I did when I was in the building was to get a message out to my parents to say that I was alive and okay. And that was made a bit harder by the fact that I couldn't reach my cell phone, so I had to rely on one of the other staff members and got her to send a message out to them. And so Mum and Dad both received this random text message from this number that they'd never seen before that said, Nick's trapped but he's okay. And so they were immediately, I guess, comforted by that. They didn't realise though that our building was collapsed. They thought that by trapped I meant that the doors were jammed and we couldn't get out. But then they saw the pictures and obviously the story was a bit different for them. But because they'd received that bit of news, they knew that I was okay. So at that point, they just then made contact with our other office in Ashburton and kept in touch with the guys standing outside the building, and eventually came into town later in the evening when it was looking likely that I was coming out, in the next hour or two. For our Ashburton office, it was also quite a traumatic time as well. They saw it all. They obviously felt it down there and evacuated their building. But then when they came back in, they saw pictures coming through from Christchurch, and the pictures coming through were of our building collapsed, and they had no idea that any of us were alive. So they were very traumatised as well. There were a lot of tears. For hours they camped out around the TV into the night, supporting each other, which was pretty important that they were there together. And also for as the night went on, they obviously found out that Philip McDonald, our director who was killed, was not coming out, and his family and obviously his close friends and the directors had to go through the traumatic time of waiting for his body to be released from the Burnham military camp, where they were doing all the ID of the bodies. So that was another sort of horrible experience that they all had to go through as well, waiting to have the official confirmation that he wasn't actually coming out. So yeah, it's certainly been an interesting time for all of us. For me, it's probably been the most testing time of my life. But as I say, your attitude determines your altitude, and I think that's why I've sort of come through it with a positive viewpoint. You take out of it what you can, and for me, the fact that I'm still here is very important. If I'd been a couple of metres away towards where Philip was, I wouldn't be standing here in front of you talking today. I wouldn't be here at all. So there's an element of luck, and perhaps it's not your time, but at the end of the day, you've got to make the most of every day. So that probably summarises it for me. So happy to take any questions from you guys. Yep.
What was the attitude, something altitude?
Your attitude determines your altitude. So the better your attitude is, the more you're going to gain out of things. Yep.
Do you have any consequences now from it, like your experience, like do you get anxiety sometimes with going into town, etc.?
No, that's a good question actually. I have been into town quite a lot. I've been for 3 trips through the red zone. The first one was probably the hardest, especially when they came to our site. But at that point the whole building had been cleared away, so it wasn't like you were going back and seeing what it actually looked like on the day. At that point it was just a concrete pad. But in terms of consequences for me right now as well, I have quite a significant limp, which the cane there helps me with. And whether that goes or not, the surgeons can't tell me yet. It's going to be dependent upon how long it takes the other muscles in my left leg here to adapt and do things differently. Yeah. But from a perspective of going into town, ever going back to work in town and things, not an issue for me. I'd quite happily go back into a newly rebuilt CBD and work in a new building. You have to remember that any buildings that get built in there now are going to be built stronger and more robustly as well. They'll be to new standards. So from my point of view, if that's happened, I don't have an issue in town again. Any other questions? Yep.
In that 10 hours a week, after thinking my life, what else is like after that?
Yeah, I thought a lot about my family and the things that I've probably achieved in my life to date. So I'd lived over in the UK for about 2.5 years and did a lot of travelling and saw a lot of the world. So I thought about lots of those sort of things. Good things. I thought about a lot of good things that had happened. My childhood growing up and all the good times and sailing and all that sort of stuff. Yep.
At any point were you either negative about what had happened or anything, or were you positive pretty much the whole way through?
I'd be lying if I said I was positive the whole time. There were a couple of times when I was a bit down in the dumps. One of those was a good friend of mine was getting married in Auckland, and when I'd gone into the trauma unit, I'd set myself a goal of, okay, I'm going to be well enough to go to this wedding. And about 2 days before the wedding, it was just not going to happen. And I think that night, there were a few tears down the phone to one of my good mates who was going up to say that I couldn't go. The other time was explosions from the wounds in my bum, where a lot of liquid that had built up behind released. And it was pretty gross, actually. And it was all over the floor. It was after I'd had a physio session, and so I was standing there waiting for the physio to finish what she was doing, and all of a sudden just went, it all just went all over. It was really gross. And it was really painful as well. And I'd been in hospital quite a few weeks by then, and I thought things were tracking along pretty well. But when that happened, I just thought, oh God, I'm going to be in here for weeks more. And so that was a real downer sort of day. I guess I was picked up a little bit by the Mumble Mob guy that was in the bed next to me. He said, respect, dude, that must really hurt. I've got his number now if I ever need him. Yep.
Did you think in the building that you were ever not going to make it?
No,
No?
not once. No. As I said, after the building came down and I realised I was still alive, I knew then that someone would come and get me. Yep. There was not one time.
Like, as you said, the building had collapsed, so it was dark in there, but for those 10 hours that you were in there, were you talking to your...
Yep. So I had a colleague who had actually started work for us that day, sitting at the desk behind me. Yeah, pretty traumatic time for her too. She was getting married in 3 weeks. And, so for the first 3/4 of an hour, I actually spent that time trying to calm her down. She was panicking majorly, understandably so. It was her first day at work. But so I could talk quite freely with her. She was right behind me. There's another staff member who was about less than from me to the wall away, and we were having to shout to talk to each other because there was a concrete beam in between us. So yeah, I could talk to 2 people basically, but we also knew that Cam across the way could talk to 3 others as well. So yeah, there was sort of 6 of us, but we had no idea where the rest of our staff were. Yeah. Yep.
When you say that there was 12 people, did you mean on your level or in the whole building?
No, 12 within our office in that building. Yeah. So in the whole building there were about 3 or 4 different companies. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
When it happened, did you notice a really perfect?
Yeah, it was the building initially just went up vertically really quickly, and yeah, up until then I'd never been under my desk at all for any of the aftershocks, but that one I was straight under. Yeah. Yep.
Where is the new building you're in now?
We are in a 1-level building on Mandeville Street that's steel framed, and the engineers assure us it won't collapse. So.
What was it like being in the building in the aftershock?
Yeah, that was, for me, that was quite painful actually, because every aftershock that came through, because there were some fairly big ones, it just meant there was a little bit more pressure on my waist. I guess it was just the building compacting down a bit. Yep.
How do you feel now that like the whole daily routine has changed? Do you seem to have physio every day?
Yeah, I'm not having physio every day now, but my daily routine is quite different. I mean, I'm still having different treatments and things. Twice a week having my leg massage to try and help the circulation in the leg and to help perhaps get the sciatic nerve going a bit more. So my routine is very different from week to week, I guess. And also just getting ready for work in the morning now just takes that bit longer because my foot doesn't work, and you know, you've got to put a brace on and you've got to put the strapping on and all sorts of things. You know, it is quite different.
So do you work every single day, like your normal 5-day week?
Yeah. Initially, when I first came out of hospital, I started doing a little bit of stuff from home on my laptop. And then I think it was in about June that I started going back into the office for a couple of hours a day, and then just gradually built up my hours till I think it was mid-August that I went back to work full time. Came off ACC at that point as well.
How's it impacted you mentally?
Yeah, good question. I think still rattle everyone, I think. And certainly the smaller ones don't impact me, but when you get ones like we had on the 23rd of December, I think it was, you start thinking, should I actually leave Christchurch now? And then I go, well, you know, it could happen anywhere. So I'm here, I'm still here.
Future goals, where are you heading to now? Has it changed or?
Career-wise, I still have the same goals. I want to become a partner in our firm within the next 2 to 3 years. Personally though, I think some of my personal goals have changed a bit. For example, I'd like to do some more travel again. I've been back in New Zealand for 3 years now, and in August I've booked a big holiday through Southeast Asia with some mates, and we're just taking another break for a month or so. So I guess it's about getting back to having some of your own things in your life as well. As I said, I've always been a very career-focused person, so now I'm just trying to, I guess, balance it out a little bit more. Yeah, a bit more time for myself and my family and friends. Yeah. Yep.
Do you look at life differently knowing that you almost had like a life-ending sort of experience?
Yeah, you do. Yeah. You make the most of every day a lot more. I hardly ever say no to people now about going to do things. So if a mate rings up and says, hey, do you want to come and do this weekend? I'll generally always say yes, unless something else is on. But you do, I guess it's about making the most of things. And you're only here for a short time, really. So you've got to do what you can in a short space of time. You never know when your number's up. Yep.
We active in all our playing sports and stuff before.
Yeah, so I used to do a lot of skiing and a lot of sailing, and obviously with the sailing thing there's a fair bit of balance involved with that, and at the moment that's just not quite there. I'm still doing sailing, but I'm doing it in big boats now, and you just adapt, I guess. So instead of doing it in small boats and having to race around decks and things, I just do it in a bit bigger boat and a bit more stability and stuff. Skiing though, I bought a Mount season pass this year, so I will be skiing this year.
Okay, are there any last questions that you'd like to ask? This is your opportunity, your only opportunity.
This may sound like a stupid question, but what would you rather your life before or now that you've known?
That's a good question, actually. I guess a balance of the two would be good. My life beforehand was very career focused, as you said, so now it's been balanced out a bit more, but obviously with the physical things that have happened to me, some of those things that I was doing beforehand I can't do now. So it'd be nice to be able to get back to do some of those other things, but I think my attitude now is a bit different towards career. So it's about having balance in your life, work-life balance, yeah.
That's all right if you don't want to answer the question, but you know how you said it was the tissue in your bum?
Yep.
Does that mean that you don't have like bum?
That's a relevant question, actually. They took out, on the right side, they took out 50% of the muscle. So there's still 50% there that can work. And on the other side, they took out slightly more. I think there's about 45% left. I still have a bum, basically. And as the nurses in hospital keep joking with me, it's a good way of getting your bum a bit smaller, but you know, I'd rather do it another way, really. But I still do it. But it's obviously, yeah, it's a bit flatter. You know?
There is one thing that they need for their assessment, and it's just if you could finish off the sentence that says, my life is a good example of resilience
because not at one single point in that whole experience did I think I was not going to get out of it alive and without.